But I gave that up. I was addicted to it. Seriously, I couldn't stop playing it. I wanted to win so bad, but I don't play to win. I know, for fun, right? Yeah, I've got a problem with that. I gotta win everything. Especially games like that. It depends on who I'm playing with, I guess. I was like, I gotta leave this game off my phone. I'm not gonna slide. My brother's got possibly DP. Yeah, I either go to the convention center or. Yeah, you know, I would get frustrated with some people it's like, I know you don't know that word. It doesn't matter if they know it or not. It's just slow. No, I know, but it would be something like, well, no, I know, but like ridiculous, like lengthy, long words you never heard of. There's no way. I talk about like my dad. There's no way you know that word, Dad. He's like, no. They like have an app you can use to cheat. It's like, what's the point of that? Like, what's the point if you're just gonna cheat? I didn't know that.
All right, so let's get back to, well, let's actually start class now.
Yeah, those quizzes really do. He's like, screw everybody else.
There's only an hour left. Like, I guess we'll start working. So, we're going to cover each of these PowerPoints, watch videos. Dating activity.
We had not enough
Depends on how quickly we get through this. It's a reserve. Actually, I never copied it. Never printed it. Guess it's not happening. All right, so we're going to talk Meuser first, residential programming. This is my bread and butter right here. Outside supported education, my favorite topic when it comes to residential programming is my second. Because I did it a lot, so I kind of know a little bit about it. And if for some reason I couldn't go back, like let's say I didn't want to be back into practitioner. First thing I do is try to do something in support education. That's my passion. But if not, because that's a kind of narrow field, there aren't a lot of support education. Agencies, especially, I mean, New Jersey's got a bunch compared to most places. So if I couldn't do that, I'd go back to housing. I really liked housing because you really got to know people the best. I spent 3 or 4 years at partial care, and it was fun, and it was great for my career because I learned a lot about running groups, and that was really important. But when you're in partial care, you see people 6 hours total. If you're one practitioner, you don't have the same people with you all 6 hours. You may only see them an hour or two. And then all the other days, sometimes an hour, much of it they're spent either in their apartments or in their group homes or shelters or wherever the residence is. So the counselors that work in the residential agencies see people the most in a lot of cases. You got a person with a ton of different resources, right? They may be they may be living in a residential program, supported housing, let's say. So they have their apartment and they have their residential staff that comes, as much as or as little as they need. But they also see a psychiatrist, they might see a therapist, they may have a job coach, they have their pharmacist, they have their medical specialists, their podiatrists and dentists, all these other specialists depending on their medical needs. They may have a family support group, they may have a 12-step group. They have all these resources in this giant web. And it really is supposed to fall on the person themselves to manage all of this, right? It's their lives, but we know some people can't do that. They need assistance. Well, who takes the lead? Is it the podiatrist? No. Is it the job coach? Not really. They might take the lead on the job hunt, but who takes the lead in making sure the services are integrated and coordinated and all happening? It's oftentimes defaults to the residential program. So just because they just see the person the most and, a lot of it just kind of falls on them. And, so that's why I feel like you get to know the person because you're involved in all those other services. For example, you may need to have the person sign releases to communicate with those services if the person is not able to or wishes for your assistance. So you kind of have to be like, oh, okay, so if I need to speak to a podiatrist, I need their name and their info, and hey, when was the last time you saw this podiatrist? Oh, do you need help making an appointment, transportation, etc., and it kind of works that way. So even if the counselor isn't like in the person's home, a la group home, married or married, even if it's a supported housing program, those counselors are often seeing that person most. So that's why residential, I think, is a great first job in the field because you learn about all those other services a good deal because you have to be connected to them, and if the person's not connected to them, you need to kind of have a good amount of base knowledge to show them, hey, are you interested in the service? Oh, what's that? You need to be able to answer that question. So I like residential, in case you couldn't know. All right, so housing we can think of as a protected environment. What do you think that might be? Yeah, yes, right.
They have people there. It's not like they're living on their own. They have people there that they can go to with questions that are also there to protect them and be advocates and also cushion between them and the outside world.
Yeah, sort of like an advocate or a liaison in a sense. Well, let's say they're going to be getting services. Let's just say they live in a house, and don't see anybody. How am I housing the environment even in that case?
I think like housing is like where you go and just save, maybe not having to go out with your friends. You may use at home, like it's a safe environment.
Should be, right? A lot of times, a person comes home and people use it in their house. Somebody lives with them, and it's like, that's hard to mitigate. But you did hit on an important point.
And they're not on the street,
Right. When they have a place to live, like a house, chances are, if they have a choice between living in the house, even if it's got bad influences in it, or living in the street, they're going to pick the house, right? There's a certain element of safety, even if there's dangerous factors in that house, that are probably more safe than the street. Right? Think of everything that can happen in the street. Right? It's not just getting robbed, it's all of the weather elements, it's the legal elements. There's so much, right? I pity people, that, and in some sense, I think people derive a sense of independence. There are a large population of people that are homeless and choose not to be, like the life to a certain extent, when they're comparing it perhaps to a shelter. In that case, shelter in some cases is better than nothing, but in some cases, the person would rather be in the street. That's sad. But yeah, it's a protective environment. We think of, if everyone heard of Abraham Maslow, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yes, first level, the triangle, the base, the little fat part is what? Base level needs.
Food, shelter.
The base level, I need to eat, I need to have some food, some drink, and a roof over my head, and some clothes. And so if any of those are lacking, not much recovery can go on because you're in survival.
Exactly.
How could you expect somebody to recover when they don't know when they're going to get, where they're going to get their next meal, or where they're sleeping? So a lot of times somebody comes in off the street or into a residential agency or into any kind of social service agency. One of the first things this practitioner is going to ask and focus on is like, where are you living and what kind of environment is it? And if they don't have a place to live, or if it's a really negative situation, it's often a treatment priority early on. We need to fix this because we can't fix anything else until we fix this. Supported education counselor, to go back to that, working with somebody to get into college, and they don't have a roof over their head. Even if they get into college, they manage to get in. What are the chances of success when they don't have a steady place to sleep, store their food? basic hygiene. That person's just trying to get by. And if I was that person's sport education counselor, I would be referring the hell out of them to, temporary housing or whatever I could. Because I would know as a professional that their chances of succeeding in that element are nil without that element. So we see multiple studies demonstrate housing instability as one of the most common consequences of substance abuse. So you have substance abuse, the co-occurring population. If they're not engaged in treatment, if they're still, they haven't engaged and their, drug use is sort of unabated, they're not able to comprehend the consequences, or they don't care, about the consequences. And housing is a lot of times one of the, I don't know if I could say that actually true, one of the first things to go. If you think about how housing, I would assume for you guys, if you live on your own, housing is probably your biggest expense on a monthly basis, right? So if you are actively using, and a lot of times that requires a lot of money, what will often not get paid because it's hard to make rent, and that is a big problem, So somebody has a mental illness combined with the fact that they are in the throes of addiction, it's going to be hard for that person to see the consequences. We talked about how short-term sort of rules everything with this population. They can't see the long. The short-term is too painful or too much. So housing is a safeguard from the street, even when it's shitty housing. And if you get somebody in and their housing situation is not good, you're going to want to make that one of your priorities, right? All right, so why is housing such a big issue? And this is magnified in New Jersey. We sort of has a housing crisis here. We have some, but it's really freaking expensive. Anyone live on their own? Share what they pay in rent. If you pay under $1,000, it's like, wow.
Tell me where you're living.
Yeah. Where can I give me some of that? I'm in Essex County, and rent is just ridiculous in Essex County. Proximity to New York, but I know Union County is really bad too. Just like you look at any. I was just looking at it the other day because I came across some random tax table in New Jersey, and it's like even the counties where you think like there aren't that many people, out in Hunterdon and Warren, ridiculous taxes, and that go along with the taxes, the rents. And the costs of housing. So all of these issues, in a sense, are sort of multiplied in New Jersey. So we got a lot of systems issues. SH, supportive housing, is scarce because of restrictive eligibility. Neither group has taken responsibility and often excludes the other. All right? This is a great point that they brought up in the book, in the text. It's like, since nobody has stepped up, since people in the supported substance abuse realm are setting up and be like, we'll take control of people with mental illness too. Come on over, guys. And people on the mental health side aren't being like, hey, everybody with substance abuse, please join us. We end up with sort of a fractured system that says, oh, you can come in with your mental illness, but you can't have active substance abuse. That's not allowed. Run into these like parallel sequential treatment type of situations, or this substance abuse place where it's like, oh, I can't deal with these psychotic episodes. This is, our staff aren't trained in how to deal with this. You need a psych hospital. You need some kind of psych services. So it goes back to the systems issues. The Division of Mental Health and Addiction Services is trying to resolve some of that. It's been a few years since I've been in that arena, but when I left, they had been under that same umbrella for like 2 or 3 years, and we're still operating as 2 satellites. Do a lot of talking to one another. There's a lot of turf wars, saying, like, hey, that's my funding. You can't have that. They kind of latch onto that funding. Or at loads to kind of do a lot that can endanger that. I can understand that. So we got systems issues. It's fractured. There hasn't been a lot of integration historically. Now all of a sudden we're forcing it. And the agencies are slow to adopt it. Legal issues. So public housing has certain eligibilities. It might be dependent on you being in treatment, which is not a core tenet of supportive housing. For people that haven't gone through it yet, you'll hear a lot more about supportive housing program. But one of the core elements of it is that the separation of treatment services and housing. Supportive housing is of the opinion that housing is a right, the right to affordable housing. It's not a privilege. And so theoretically, in the ones that practice true supportive housing, you could say, I don't want your services anymore, and just live without having counselors visiting your home. Just pay your rent, and then if you should change your mind, you say, hey, I can use help with this or that. So a public housing sector will not often have, well, not often, will not have that option. It's like a lot of times they might have these stipulations in place that say you need to be under the care of a psychiatrist or whatever stipulations they put in place. A lot of people that have been in the mental health system or in the substance abuse system are also in the legal system. So they've got petty crimes, they've got records, they've been in jail or prison, and then that shows up on their record, that impacts their credit worthiness. Ever get rejected by a landlord for something like that? It's not pleasant. And so that is another issue. If you have really bad credit, or if you just, the landlord is asking for things that you can't produce, it's going to be hard. Like, you know, do you have a full-time job? Obviously, you're going to want to know if that's steady income. So the legal issues persist as well. And then clinical issues. So the person that is not taking their medication, that is causing a disturbance in the apartment building because they're blasting their music or screaming at the walls, or they haven't bathed in 3 weeks and the smell emanating from the door is repulsive. You know, there are many different behavioral problems that people that are struggling with their recovery might engage in, either purposely or in the throes of active psychosis. So this is a problem, right? Her landlord goes in an apartment and it's trashed because the person was psychotic and thought that there was a devil in the room and destroyed it, is probably going to think twice, even if they can't legally do it. They might come up with some other reasons to deny the next person that comes in to apply for housing that has, some sort of obvious condition. So the stigma issues are big. And think about it, if you were a landlord and you got burned, I can kind of sympathize here because I want my property not to get destroyed. So I would want to help, the persons in there that would be best at that. So that's a big thing for supported housing people, is having good landlords that do, just having a good network. You come in, you don't know anybody, somebody comes in and is like, I need a place to live, and they start applying and start getting denied. It's like hard. Okay, so we'll go through this quickly because it seemed like from the quiz you guys really were able to grasp this. The different types of housing based on wetness. Wet housing is tolerant. There's a lot of people still in engagement at that point. They might only just be there to have a roof over their head and have no desire to change. And if the housing is set up in such a way, great. I don't know of any of this type of housing personally, but I'm sure it exists. And then you see much more of these two. Yeah. And a lot of psych rehab programs are going to subscribe to this. Why? Why would a psych rehab program kind of fit as a damp tolerance level as opposed to dry tolerance level?
Because I guess being intolerant could prevent people from, aspiring to the goal of like stop using drugs.
Okay. You're on to something. Who else wants to try that? Man.
Because of the fact that it's tolerant, somewhat tolerant, it gives them a little more wiggle room to recover, and it relates to psych rehab because they understand, like, hey, you slip up sometimes, that's part of the recovery process. Whereas if they're in an intolerant place, it doesn't give them that room to grow, and it's kind of just like, oh,
yeah,
you can't,
Yeah, good answer. We really thrive on individualized services. It's like one of the hallmarks of psych rehab. And we realize everybody's recovery is going to be at a different pace, and it's not linear. So we should expect relapse, people using even though they're in recovery. And as such, it'd be hard to run a psych rehab program with a dry tolerance. It's like, what is it? Zero tolerance policy. You get caught once and you're out, or even a 3 strikes and you're out policy. Slightly more, flexible and forgiving. But what if the person's timeline is not 3 strikes? There's probably a lot of us. So a psych rehab program is going to be more than that.
What about the substance use system?
What? Substance abuse?
Yeah.
Yes, I have less experience, but I would imagine when you see dry tolerance, it would be more in substance abuse only. And they do have a much more, in a lot of models, harsher consequences. You get caught, dirty urine, you're out. Or maybe it's a 3 strikes. There's some kind of very rigid policy. And I imagine that was born out of, getting burned a lot of times. The fact that people that have addiction in their past are oftentimes manipulative, and get what they need, and they had to draw a line. They had to be a little bit more black and white, and that really isn't really with our version of the recovery. It's like rehab. So I would venture to say that substance abuse is softening somewhat. So with psych rehab, we're always about really no arbitrary time limits. You think about all the different service models in psych rehab, they're always time limit packed. We never say you can only be in packed for a certain amount of time. Supported housing, time unlimited. Supported employment, time unlimited. We don't impose time frames on people. Think of the time limited programs that are out there. Group homes. A lot of times group home programs have, 18, 24 months and then you're out. A lot of times the inflexibility has not lent itself to an evidence base. So the evidence isn't as strong to show that group homes produce positive outcomes as compared to, say, supported housing. Partial care programs. Partial care programs are time limited. At least they are in principle. Many of them allow people to stay much longer than they say, but actually that's changed a lot in recent years, from my understanding. Again, partial care programs, not evidence-based. The evidence-based programs tend to be the time limit. And it would make sense because we realize, again, people have their own timelines. So I can't just prescribe, like, who says 6 months is the right amount of time? 18 months, 20 months.
I work in transitional housing.
Yep.
And because it's transitional by definition, it's time limited.
Yep.
So we give them, we say 6 to 12 months, but it's closer to 12 to 18 months to help them to try and get it together and get permanent housing and help them with that.
Super valuable service, definitely needed. And I know from working with you with your internship that they do a very good job practicing the goals, values, and principles of psych rehab. The only thing is I don't know what the evidence says about that model. My guess is that it's not as strong in supported housing, or maybe it's just a lot of evidence hasn't been done. Enough evidence has been done to say this is, but transitional housing has not approached evidence-based based status. Not to say it's not a good program, it could be a great program. But I think another thing is transitional housing can look so different. And then it's a problem with supported housing too. But transitional housing could be like, oh, we get you in and out, and you're out a month.
Yeah, shelter is
Right.
transitional housing.
And then we have, 18 to 24 month timeline for transitional housing, probably even longer time for specialized populations. So it's hard to kind of put all of those models into one and be like, all the evidence is great, evidence-based. So I don't know if we'll ever get there, despite being really great programs out there. So typically, yeah, we don't have arbitrary time limits because they're unrealistic. They don't respect people's individual differences. And in severe cases, either way, severe mental illness, severe drug addiction, or both, you do have specialized services that are going to be a little bit more intense and assertive. Okay, so one of the big things that you want to do clinically, and this should sound fairly familiar, is match the stage of treatment to the program level, right? So if somebody is in active treatment and they're surrounded by people working in active treatment and the person is in engagement, then it's not going to be a right fit. That person is going to potentially compromise the what's the word, the integrity of the program, and the people around them that are all in active treatment are going to be pissed off at that person. So that person should be in a group, stage-wise group with other people that's similar persuasion. They look at level of functioning, often or most related to independent living skills. So if somebody is in a residential program and they're getting help for substance abuse, they're getting help for their mental illness, they're getting assistance in both of those things, right? They're getting, hopefully they're getting some kind of therapy, or they're getting some kind of skills teaching on how to manage their mental illness or how to manage their substance abuse. But it's not just those things that hinder people, right? I could have my substance abuse under control, be taking my meds, be pretty good health-wise, but I don't know how to cook and clean or take my meds, or who to call if there's a crisis, or get around town. Independent living skills. So a lot of times these are focused as well as the basics of staying sober, staying clean, staying stable. Big feature as well is access to self-help. So it may not be enough for a supported housing program to be like, oh, hey, you need some self-help? Yeah, I do. All right, there's a 12-step group down there meeting in an hour down the street. What could go wrong? Why isn't that enough? It might be enough for some. But what if the person has a horrible sense of direction? And they might be like, oh, okay, I'll go. But in the back of their mind, they're thinking, there's no way. It was not specific enough for me. Oh, it's just down the street. I have social phobia. What if I get lost? There's no way. So the person might explore a little bit with the person. So what do you think about going to that meeting down the street? I think I would go, but I would really want somebody to go with me the first time because I get really anxious about going to see this the first time. Oh, it's reasonable. You want me to come with you? Go down there for it. I'll walk you down there. You might be like, walk you down there. Person's not a child. You may have to start at that base level, not to infantilize people, but to say, what are your concerns, and be prepared for something as elementary as like, I'm a little worried about going out in public. You might have even considered that. Or maybe it's not just down the street, but it's like, it's a mile or two down, and just assume the person can get a ride. Like, the person walks away and you're like, yeah, that's great. I don't know how the hell I'm going to get there. So are we thinking about transportation issues? Can you help the person? Can you give them a ride yourself if that's the type of residential agency you are? Some would do that. Can't tell you how many times I've driven people and picked them up from AA meetings, working in residential programs. So transportation is a big one. Or it's like, hey, it's, you got to take the 92 4 stops, and I'll help you with all elements of that. Reading a bus schedule, the site rehab process. Sponsorship. Why did I add that one up there? Talked about self-help a few weeks ago. Maria?
Well, we want to help them to create a natural network,
Yeah.
social network out there.
Good. And so it might not be enough for somebody, say I'm a practitioner, you're the person in recovery, I dropped you off, I helped you find the group, I provided the transportation, put you right at the front door, I'm like, okay, Maria, see you in an hour. You get off the bus or the van and go inside, and you go over to the corner, and you don't say anything to anybody, and come back out, you know. So, all right, that's good, we got you there, but now we might need to take the next step, you know, hey, did you talk to anyone? What was hard about it? You know, how can we maybe make this easier? Let's role play. Maybe I'll come into the meeting if it's an open meeting, of course. And maybe we could, you know, sit and cheer together.
And maybe the person who doesn't like the meeting is doing another one.
Right, exactly. Yeah, actually, thank you for bringing it. I really appreciate all the help. It's just, I didn't feel comfortable there. Any number of those things. So access isn't just telling them, hey, there's a meeting here. It's making sure that it's the right time for them. It's making sure they can get there. It's making sure that once they do get there, that they can actually take the next step to maybe share or get on the road to sponsorship, maybe making a linkage with somebody that's in a leadership position. If we're talking AA. Oftentimes when we say self-help, we're sort of synonymous, but as we've learned, there are a lot of different types of self-help. And then family involvement. Positive or negative, right? Positives, family involvement, clinical issues, residential. Give me a couple. Yes?
They know the person.
They know the person really well. Yeah, you're in that family group, right? Class that's also going on. Another positive. How might they help the residential team, family?
Medical history.
Yeah, they could be a bit, if the person is a bad historian, they might have medical documentation or records that the person doesn't have. They have a relationship, they might be able to talk to the person in a way and get stuff out of them that the professionals don't. All right. What about the negative?
Their behaviors.
Whose? Person in recovery or the
Yes,
family?
the family, the person in recovery, the family can talk about their behavior.
And what, exaggerate them? We're talking things that might be a negative issue for clinicians with family. So how might family be a hindrance?
Or being negative.
Okay,
Saying
so if the
negative
person
things.
is making judgments
Yeah.
and just, oh, you're a piece of crap, you're never gonna do anything with your life, you know, it just puts the person in a really bad headspace, you know, by you know, self-esteem type of things, certainly can not help with recovery. What else can family do that might hinder recovery? Yes. So maybe they're struggling too, and they're actually providing a accepting environment or encouraging environment rather than.
I remember my internship, I have like one individual like that the parents were so protective. Like he wanted to do things in the community and we set out, he was going to learn how to take the bus and then, oh no, it's gonna get lost and like just didn't let him do anything. It was so hard.
So we can have like the non-involvement, which would be another one. It's like family just doesn't give a shit. And or the over-involvement.
Yeah.
Overly protected, doesn't want the person to fail or you know, have any kind of, you know, discomfort. And as we know ourselves, that's oftentimes the biggest learning lesson is when we screw things up. Like you need that opportunity to fail sometimes. The biggest example I hear about is like represented payees. So when you have a family member or anybody managing your money for you, then not a fun thing for psychiatric practitioners. But there's a lot of power struggle in that kind of relationship. It could be really great and looking out for the person, or they could kind of take that to the extreme. be very restricted. So I'm not going to spend too much on these because, again, you guys are pretty good in the quiz with this. But they talked in the group, they talked in the text about the structure and staffing, the philosophy, and the programming. The only things I'll say about that is the structure and staffing is very similar to other types of residential models you're going to see in psych rehab, like supported housing programs or group home type of programs. So it's very similar. You got, some kind of clinician or director at the top, and then a bunch of direct care staff, and oftentimes auxiliary staff like a nurse or some kind of specialists. Philosophy, so a lot of these types of programs are going to be for people in action. People that are actively working on cutting down or have cut down. And then the work order day. So why do they make people be outside the residence during the day? Why can't they just stay in their room all day? I mean, in psych rehab, you do honor individualism. Right? If I want to stay in my room all day, who are you to tell me? I can't. Yes?
I think it had a lot to do with the community reintegration, just getting them out there involved with other people. Instead of keeping them away from the community, they wanted them to start being involved so that way when they leave, they already have exposure.
Yeah. So they're protecting against like isolation, where people left to their own devices, especially institutional type behavior, would just lay in bed all day, or would rather avoid interaction. Who else? Yes.
I was just going to say, if to be in that program, they have to be in the action stage around. So by that time, abstinence should be at least the priority for them. So they should want to be at that point involved in wanting to be involved out there.
And what about from a mental health standpoint? So certainly, action, person's engaged in treatment, working to cut down or has cut down, being outside of the home.
Mm-hmm.
You actually, in ways, could tempt the person, but, as opposed to, again, going back to the protective parents, no, let's just keep them at home all the time because if they stay at home in my care, they're not going to use. Or, again, going back to intervention, or I let them use in my house because I know if they're using in my house that they're safe rather than using out in the streets. Get some what's the word? Codependency going on there. So we can take this too far, but at the same time, again, giving permission to fail, right? It's like people aren't going to learn the skills until we put them in the situation. So I know it's scary to go out in the community and be tempted to use or see people that are from the past that might tempt you. But we've worked on these skills and we've worked on refusal and what to say in these situations and stuff. And we're never going to know if they were until you're outside. So it's, again, community reintegration, as we said, and it's putting into practice the skills that people are teaching. You're not going to be able to do drug refusal skills in your bedroom in front of the mirror and have it be really effective. You need to do it in the environment where it's actually going to be used and helpful. And so where I was getting actually from the mental health standpoint is like, if somebody's, has some sort of goal related to mental health recovery, it's oftentimes not going to be helped by staying home all day. That's going to often breed, depression or self-esteem issues or anxiety issues or paranoia. So
the goals at that time are active goals.
Yep. And we want to challenge people at that stage and say, hey, you've given the skills, you're in action, you've been at this a little while, we believe in you, let's do it. Okay, so just quick on training regarding drugs and alcohol. So the training might differ. I can't remember if Gemini was an abstinence-only program, I think. They didn't really employ harm reduction strategies, if I remember correctly. But some agencies would, have protective elements in place. This I thought was interesting. I never heard of pre-self-help. Does anyone Well, I don't want to ask you because it's weird. But sometimes the person, if you think about readiness, may not be ready for a self-help type of treatment yet. We've talked about self-help being for active treatment in most cases. So if the person's not quite there and not quite active, they might just want information about groups. So, I sit down with Maria, and Maria is trying, she's not there yet, but let's say she's in persuasion, and I talk about self-help, and she's like, oh, 12-step? Oh, that's that God bullshit. I don't want to hear that. And it's like, oh, okay. So maybe we would do some learning about the groups and figure out exactly what role God has in 12 steps. If Maria's not cool with that, all right, let's explore some other self-help groups that don't involve a higher power. So pre-self-help, it's like, here's what self-help is. What do you think about it? Then we start using those order skills and get people talking. Reflect. This text ended with a few things related to when residential treatment is not available, and this is also the case. As I said, it is in sparse supply. So sometimes you just got to find the best situation you can. Structured activities in another setting. So getting the person out of the ghetto where they live, or out of the bad apartment complex where it's just drugs are rampant. And let's get you into the partial care program or into the self-help program where at least it's a positive environment. We spend 6 hours of your day away from the negative aspects of your life and be in a somewhat safe place. So I used to do this a lot when we were in Bridgeway in Elizabeth. Somebody lived in Pierce Manor, and it's just drugs and gangs, and they had a lot to deal with when they weren't at that day program from Monday to Free. But at least they had that 6 hours where they could have some place to go and feel connected and feel like people care about them, and like if they don't show up, somebody's gonna make a phone call and say, hey, we missed you. Shit's important. And then forming allegiance with different social network members. So getting tight with people that are their allies is going to help, especially if the person's in the early stages of treatment, right? The person hasn't made that commitment for active treatment yet. If you are able to kind of get in there and, get on the side of the mom or the girlfriend or the, friend of theirs that has managed to get clean and start to sort of influence them from a few different angles. So that is residential treatment. That's the last slide. All right, so any questions? All right, let's do number 2.
Switch the sound.
Hmm?
The sound from the back to the Mac.
I turned it back, yeah. Yeah, I turned it off for this because I wanted the quality to be good.
Yeah.
All right, what time is it?
Professor, I have a question.
Yes.
For the list of articles, we have to select 2 from each list because for the link that you provided, it's a link of articles.
You've transitioned me way out of where I was.
We're looking at the
We're gonna have to get back to the after class on
There's
that.
4 articles and going through the first 2, but that's not the articles for the class. Teacher looking at the different.
Hit me up with that question after this is over.
Okay.
All right. So that was Meuser. Now we're going to transition to more of the practical workbook activity type stuff in Rosengren, chapter 8, ambivalence. So I read this chapter, and I had one thing that really struck me. I'm like, why was it just the first chapter?
Yeah.
So let's talk about
too far away
I
from
guess
the
it
laptop
is.
over there, that's why.
Yeah. I just thought. Okay, so I'm reading that first page, and they're like, oh, think back to the definition of MI. Client-centered, directed method for enhancing intrinsic motivation to change by exploring and resolving ambivalence. This is what motivational interviewing is all about. It's all about ambivalence. And we had to talk about change talk first, and we had to talk about managing resistance. There are all these other chapters that we focused on first. It's like, oh, now we're getting the ambivalence. What MI is all about. All right? So, note to myself when I do this course again next summer, I'm going to lead with ambivalence. Thanks. It was further clarified and confirmed for me when I was looking for a video. Let me look for an ambivalence video. Every video with MI is ambivalence. The change talk videos, the resisting, the rolling with resistance, all this is somebody that is ambivalent about change. So it really is the center of what MI is really all about, is kind of exploring that ambivalence and getting somebody to resolve it. To say, I know that I'm back and forth, but I've been back and forth for enough time now. I think I'm ready to make a decision. The decision is going to be this. So what does ambivalence mean in the strict sense of the word? Simultaneous and contradictory attitudes or feelings towards an object. I love drugs, and I hate drugs. Tomorrow I might love them again. Who knows? So how many people can relate to that feeling? If not about drugs, about other things. Everybody's hand should be going up in this classroom. It's like, how do I feel about exercise? I'm going to exercise today. I'm not going to exercise tomorrow. How do I feel about studying right now? I'm going to study, and I'm going to study tomorrow. I'm going to study the next day. And then 3 days after that, I'm not going to study.
Oh, he's the screw-its.
Yes! Basically, screw-its. So that is when we are negative, contradictory. So it could be about something. It could be about someone, a person. I could really see myself in a future with them. A person, we don't have a future. Or an action. Again, it gets back to, should I exercise? Should I not? You know, should I do my schoolwork? Should I do Snapchat for now? I don't know. All right. So we've established what ambivalence is, and I'm thinking I'm going to make this quantum leap here and say we've all felt this at some point in our lives, perhaps even today. Continual fluctuation. We're going to show a video. I'm going to show a video in a little bit, and they break it down great. It's like some of these things we stay in contemplation for. That's really what ambivalence is. It's that contemplation state. Maybe I'll do it. Maybe I won't. We stay in this stage for years. Sometimes our lifetimes. When I think back to me, my own story about getting clean, I was drunk for pretty much my 20s. It just happened to be that it was right around when I turned 30 that I went into recovery. But during those 10 years, I certainly fluctuated between, this is fine, you know, I'm still in my 20s, and this is not fine, this is bad. I'm not doing good things. And I went through that for 10 years. And thank God it was only 10 years. It's my attitude about it now. Because it could have been a hell of a lot more. Still be there. So it's constant fluctuation, and we could be in it for a million years, and then we could not be in it for a lot of years. You know, I've been good. I have not had much ambivalence about alcohol in a little while, but that doesn't mean in 5 years from now or tomorrow that it could return. Right? That it doesn't. But it's certainly possible. Ambivalence is really freaking complex. So a lot of times, like, you know, as a trainer, so I might be teaching somebody MI, it's like, you know what, it's so hard to kind of look at these factors. Ambivalence is so multi-layered and complicated. Let's just focus on change talk or rolling with resistance. You take a specific strategy, because to attack ambivalence as a whole is a little bit too complex. You know, you have to really know the person. How often do we know people super well? You know, it takes sometimes beyond the skills. I mean, even somebody that has a good degree of mastery. So, Miller and Rollinick, though, over the years, have sort of not been so much in favor of this. So what they're saying is, all right, strategies are good, but really, as we've studied motivational interviewing for many years, the more we learn about it, the more we observe, the more we realize that the most important thing when it comes to MI is change talk, is maximizing the change talk that you get and getting somebody to talk, and minimizing the sustained talk of the status quo. This is one of the best quotes I ever heard about MI. I wish I had heard this when I was a supervisor, because it is exactly what MI is. People resolve ambivalence by talking themselves into changing. Get somebody talking enough about the change, and they'll change. Seems like a big secret. That's actually what MI is. I love it. I just think that's such a good way to describe it. So what is that not? That's not you doing a lot of talking, right? You can't talk somebody into changing themselves when you're doing all of the talking, right? So that's just like a basic, like, overview rule: talk less than the person. And then we don't get people to talk about changing when they are talking about, you know, the sustained talk, do not change. Oh, I can't do it because of this. This is the reason why. Or this is the reason, this excuse or that excuse. So that's ambivalence in a nutshell. And then the 4 approaches. So evocative questions. I like it because it's so obvious, directly identifying the reasons why they might change. Early in the process, we talked about making the obvious obvious last week. Another really good quote from this book. Don't leave things unsaid. Even though you know it's obvious what we're talking about here, you and I, you know, it's like, okay, we're not beating around the bush here. We can tell that this is what we're talking about. Still state it. It's like, okay, so it seems like this is what we got going on right here. Person's gonna look at me like, yep, that's what we got going on right here. I don't want to stop, and you think it's a good idea, or, you know, whatever it's going to be. But bring it to the surface, state it, because once it's out in the open, sometimes when the person hears it, it's like, oh, it sounds different when it's out in the open. So evocative questions are direct questions about why somebody might change. And then we talked about picking the flowers. I won't spend too much time there. I already gave my awesome analogy, metaphor that was introduced here. It's really taking the most important things, the most beautiful flowers, and ignore all the weeds. And after you pick those flowers, what do you have? You have a wonderful bouquet. So, you know, you've talked with Faye. I've talked with Faye for a while, and I've got this flower. This is something really important to changing to her. And we talked a little while longer, and now I got this beautiful flower here. And now I got this third flower. Now, if I could take these as the skilled practitioner, organize them in a nice, clear way. So, Faye, we've been talking for a while, and it's really been a learning experience because you've explained to me that this is so important to you to changing it. This is a theme that you talked about that relates to positive change, and this, and really just hone in on those 3 things and ignore all the excuses and sustained talk that was going your way. And again, it might be, you know, 5% of the conversation are these flowers, and the other 95% is garbage. It's like, latch onto those things. So it's 2 things. It's latching on, but it's also recognizing first. Examine the elements, explain the relationships. So this impacts this. This you can't get because you don't have that. Missing elements, collecting. So these are the 3 different summaries I talk about in the book. I'm not going to speak a lot about them. But the bouquet is basically taking those 2 or 3 beautiful flowers, figuring out how they relate to one another and how they're going to relate to what you still might need. I've never actually heard it described this way. Once I did, I was like, okay, I can see that's what I used to do. I think when I go back and actually do motivational interviewing again, the thing that I've learned from this chapter is I knew about, you know, pulling out the pieces of the flowers, but I didn't really do so much of this bouquet in the intentional sense. Like I wasn't like, okay, now I'm going to arrange these into a new bouquet. I did it though, just like repeating the themes, showing how the themes relate to one another, showing and then the values. So I am also at times a trainer, and I just finished a training series with a residential program in Pennsylvania, and now I'm starting a new one with a different residential program. And this is something I did with the staff. The reason that I come into training these staff is they were undergoing a recovery transformation. That's the link. Basically going from the medical model to the recovery. So I had to take all these people that had been doing recovery model, you know, oh, you can't do this, you get an extra chore, I'm keeping your cigarettes, all these things that have sort of gone the way of the dinosaur when it comes to mental health treatment, and explain to them that they're not good things to be doing because people with mental destruction, people that have a right to self-determination. And it's, ooh, I'm getting some resistance. You know, well, what if they burn the house down? Okay, let's explore that. So you value safety in your job. Excellent. And that's really what that is, value sorting. So I was doing it with staff. I didn't actually use cards, but we did values clarification with staff to say, what do you value in this job? You know, why do you come to work? What do you like about it? You know, beyond just, you know, it's a paycheck. It's like, why do you like this job? You know, it's like, oh, I love helping people, or I want to give back, or my family member had mental illness, so now this is what I do. You know, everybody's got a reason for why they got into the job. And everybody has values that, despite pervasive substance abuse or, you know, the debilitating symptoms of illness, still hold values. And exploring those values and seeing how the values relate to their substance abuse or don't is really important. So I suggest you try this one day. You can print up the cards online for free. Do it with yourself if you don't do it with somebody. But get the cards. I forget how many there are. But you sort them into important, not important. You know, and you do it exactly as you want. You know, so you have as many or as little as each one. And then take all of the ones you put in the important category and separate them out to, just important and really important. And that's when you have a maximum of 5, most important, really important. And then when you have those 5 most important values, or about that many, those are what you explore, like how are they living those values? It's like, oh, I'm really into honesty, and these are the ways that I, promote my honesty. And how have the problem behaviors impacted your values? Well, I'm not really honest when it comes to my drugs. And getting to see somebody's values contradict their behavior is often a very powerful way to get somebody on that change thought about changing it. All right, so we have the 4 approaches. We just have time for a couple videos here, some examples. So I promised you some resistance last week. Let's see how we did. So I didn't get All right. So this one's just 4 minutes. This is just like kind of a little, not an overview, but there's some things that she talked about in terms of contemplation here that I really like playing. I was looking, this is where I was searching for my ambivalence video, and I'm like, oh, everybody's ambivalent.
talking about change in general, not specific to alpha. So, good overview of the stages of change. Talked mainly about treatment today, but just to go back to it. And then we're going to end today with our resistance. I want to see how this That was a good one. So, what did we notice about the practitioner? He's good. Yeah. He was. He rolled a lot of resistance from her. And he got somewhere at the end, right?
Yeah.
He got her talking about her kids. That was the change talk. You know? And he picked a few flowers there. Did anyone notice the flowers he picked?
The meat part? The part about the meat?
What's the meat got to do with change?
He was focusing on what wasn't good for her and trying to allow her to, emphasize on it to get her to think about, well, this is what's making my health, not where it's supposed to be, because her cholesterol was at that range where it's going to be high. So he was trying to, for her to see that, well, maybe you're eating too much red meat or whatever, and it's making your health go down. So he seems to me,
She didn't seem to me to want to change.
She didn't want to
What did
change.
she say? What were the few things that she maybe said? Her kids at the end, definitely. What-
turkey sandwiches, actually.
Yeah, that was a good one. She mentioned just she was having drinks and he was like, oh, you're actually pretty good flour there. Herbidate. And the one other one I noticed was, when he like basically, he wasn't getting anywhere with her. And she was like, something like, I don't even know why I come here. And he said, it's really great that you made the effort to come here, even though, you have all these like issues about getting here. And that was a good one. It's like, the fact that you're coming here shows me that you want to change. Otherwise, if you didn't want to change, you wouldn't have come. So it's good to point that out, man. I think you pointed out. All right, good job today, guys. Send us your articles. Google. Okay. Yes, what was your article?
You have them?
Yes, there are 4.
When you click on one, it's
Yeah.
only the first one. Both of them. It's too late. Just do that.
Okay. You just have to find it out of these.
Okay, so you select two from there?
Yeah.
I'll show you where else it is that might be easier to click through. Okay, go back. Okay, now go up to the top.
Yeah, there's a list of all the articles.
Well,
Yeah.
with, the list of the journal.
This is the place.
Yeah, that one. Oh, there.
This might bring you to the same list.
Click it and I'll show you. Let's see if it goes to the go down. There they are. Try clicking on one of those. Maybe that'll take you right to it.
You'll just have to look for it.
It's just gonna be on that list
Yeah,
somewhere.
you're-
I'll
yeah,
do the
okay.
get it at RU.
This one, I think this is one.
It's Green and Clark, Greenfield and Clark. So this is a Clark article.
Oh, this is one?
Yep. And then the other one